Yo, what is up, gamers? We're getting close to the end of Spooky Month, and in honor of that, I kind of just wanted to make this video, talking about it and talking about just horror in general and my own personal thoughts, really. So, yeah, let's just get right into it. So, here's my thing. Most horror movies lately, they're not good. Like, it seems like almost like 85-90% of horror movies that come out are just trash. And I mean, honestly, most movies in general nowadays come out are pretty bad. But today we're focusing just on horror movies specifically, and yeah, I think that there is a lot to really unpack with some of this stuff. Now, the reason why I say this is for a couple of reasons, but they just kind of go over some stuff really quickly. A lot of horror movies nowadays, I mean, they're very predictable in terms of how the story itself goes and plays itself out. We can kind of really expect how everything is gonna go. There's not really, I mean, for me personally, I don't really get jump scared unless it's like really a good jump scare, and even then, like, it's not. I rarely ever actually have like a oh jump back type of reaction. It's more just like, oh damn. It's like, oh well. But yeah, so that's kind of one of the things. Characters, they really aren't, they don't stand out. I mean, I can't really remember the last character from a horror movie that I genuinely remember and was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I loved that character. I was kind of upset when they died. I felt something when they survived. There's no real connection to these characters, and that's why I say they're boring. They're very two dimensional. They're very forgettable, to say the least. And that goes doubly with the antagonist slash monster slash spirit slash whatever you really want to talk about. All that stuff really is kind of just. I do want to preferences again, of course, saying that there are actually outliers. There are ones that are good, that do stand out, that do hold these principles and these type of ideals very well. I'll talk about a couple of them towards the end of this, especially because it's spooky month and everything. Gotta plug some good movies for people to watch. So stay tuned, watch to the end for that. But yeah, they really try to do these type of things. And another thing that really doesn't, I there are a couple reasons for this, but I just think that horror movies have stopped trying to push the envelope, so to speak, have really stopped trying to jar the audience in a way that would make them feel uncomfortable in some instances. Because that is part of the point of horror at the end of the day. You want to feel some type of visceral reaction that is not like a happy-go-lucky laughing. This isn't a rom-com we're watching. We're watching someone that's getting their organs torn out. It's not it's not pleasant stuff. But I think in the process of that, some people have in the process of losing some of that, it really starts to become apparent, because if you're too afraid to almost offend or jar people, the movie itself is never going to really come out that well. At least in my opinion, and that's what I've found throughout my viewing of horror movies over the last like 5 years or so. So let me give a little context about kind of what really brought this idea upon, and where my why I even have the ability to say any of this stuff. I've been watching horror movies forever. For as long as I can remember. My sister introduced me to them when I was a wee lad, peeing my diapers and everything like that, having to sleep with the lights on. And I remember, having those feelings, being scared and jarred. And I recently watched a movie by myself. It wasn't on stream or anything like that, called The Jester. And boy, 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 was it a sack. Did it just blow a whole load. It was bad. It was bad, in my opinion. The movie itself, my bad, the movie itself is an hour and 30 minutes long. You could probably watch all of that, or get the same gist, get the same vibes in pretty much a third of that time. I'd say like an hour and a half, maybe 45 minutes, give or take. Because that's honestly about as much as I kind of paid attention to it. And I still feel like I got the whole general plot and gist and all the talking points people kind of make for this movie. It revolves around two sisters, and these sisters don't really know each other that well. That's to say that they actually have never really met before. They have different mothers. The father left one of the previous sisters, or the previous sister, the older one's mother, and had another family. They meet up after his death to the jester's hands, nonetheless. Surprise, surprise. And more or less, it kind of follows both of them as a and B plot. The younger sister is hanging out with her friends, trying to like cope with the dad's death and everything, and the older sister that was abandoned is just kind of like drinking and trying to forget about the whole thing in general. She just wants to move on to the next thing, pretty much. She's not interested in anything really that's going on with these people until she eventually meets the jester. And I want to state this first before I really get farther into it. I genuinely think the B plot was very lacking in like a connection and just more interest, to say the least. I'll be real with you. The older sister story was obviously the more focused one. She encountered the jester first. She had more encounters with the jester. She was the one that kind of confronted the jester, and the other sister really just she had like two experiences, but I wouldn't really say they're two separate experiences, because once she meets the jester, this is a spoiler, once the jester finally appears in front of her, pretty much, he kills all of her friends, and then he just abducts her. And then from that point on, she's with the jester, and that's her experience with the jester, pretty much. Now, prior to this, the older sister has had like three different encounters with the jester. So obviously the first one where the jester introduces himself, then the jester follows her, and then she also has, I think, one other than I'm trying to remember. Again, it's a very forgettable movie. So she has these interactions with the jester, more of them, trying to create more of a connection and more or less try to come to terms with her own grievances against her father and her sister, more or less. At least that's kind of the moral I got from the story, because accept the reality of her situation to a degree, and also face her fears and her own anxieties about it. So like her father never wanting her, and how her sister had a happy life, and how, she's not really needed and everything like that. I summed this up in a brief synopsis, and obviously you can look into it, watch yourself if you're really that interested. I do think that you could kind of just get the whole general gist from what I'm saying relatively here. I'm not going to say how it ends, I guess, if you really want to, but yeah, I'll just leave the ending alone for that. The movie was a lot longer than it needed to be, and it had a lot of these points that I was kind of talking about before. So neither of the sisters are remembered. We have 6 side characters, pretty much. Side characters really are just like nameless people for the most part. They do not really matter at all. And that's what I'm getting to with some of that. And the plot, it's actually you can see a lot of similarities. I'm not gonna say it's a carbon copy, but very similar to Terrifier. That's kind of the difference that we're seeing with those type of things, where you have these forgettable moments, you have these forgettable characters, you have this forgettable plot, pretty much. That all just leads up to a movie that's way longer than it needs to be. That's to say that, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, just because I want to make sure I am saying this a lot. That is not saying every movie is bad. There are actually good movies out there if you look hard enough, and not even just movies, but there is other horror content out there that you can watch, and it's really good. It's really good. I've been watching quite a lot of short horror films on my stream lately. Absolutely love them. Absolutely been loving it. And it's not even, and some of them are not that scary. Some of them are actually really scary and jarring. Some of them are just funny. But what kind of matters for me in these is that, like, they are actually memorable. They are actually original, and even they don't check the box for characters, because I don't remember shit for most of these characters in terms of like names or anything like that. But I remember their importance, and more or less they really just focus on 1 to 3 characters per episode, well, per short. That's kind of seems to be like the theme for a lot of these. All right. And that really is just like the short horror itself. There are other avenues, there are other aspects of horror that you can get into. There's things like analog horror. There's found footage horror. There's like stories horror. There is a plethora online that you can find on like YouTube and that type of stuff that is very good and will really kind of give you that chill. It'll scratch that horror itch that you've really been needing. There are, again, a lot of small creators you can look at. I, for one, have found myself really watching a lot of this channel called Alter, and man, they have so many different video, like short horror vids that range from literally like 5 minutes to 15 minutes at a time. So it kind of, it really kind of, whatever you're in the mood for, you can watch. When you have this big of a catalog as Alter and like even some other popular horror film channels do have, they some of them aren't the best. I found ones of horror of Alter. I found videos from Alter that actually make me like laugh out loud audibly, and then other ones that I'm just left scratching my head like I don't know what I really just watched. But that's not to say, honestly, that I didn't really have fun watching them. So something can be bad and be good. The issue with horror movies nowadays is they're bad and predictable. Like there's nothing really unique about them, and there's no like gimmick here that makes you have a good time watching it. The first thing I really want to point out with a lot of things that I've been mentioning and kind of this criteria that helps me determine and helps me kind of, well, I keep saying criteria, but it's more like a trend, something that like I see that's a commonality between a lot of this stuff, and I think this is why I believe it's good. Anyways, it's originality. A lot of these short horror films and even the channels, they have good concepts. The actual story itself is original. Yes, obviously some of it's like in terms of like there's an antagonist monster being whatever you have, ghoulie, that is out there, that exists. It is, yeah, all that stuff is still the same. Like you got your protagonist, you got your antagonist, but it's what they do in between. It's kind of like the content, the fluff that they give that makes it so good. I mentioned Alter earlier, and going back, I remember watching this one called The Box or something like that, and what freaked me out about it so goddamn much was just like the actual aspect of what this entity is and like how it interacts with them, the sounds it makes, the looks it gives, the just the general vibe and interactions. You were always left like, oh god, don't look away, if you look away it'd be bad. And every time they look away, you're like, oh shit, no. It really starts to pull you in. And I mean, that was kind of like one of the first ones I watched from them, and that's why I love it so much, and I have such a good memory of it. But there are other horror movies, obvious other horror shorts and stuff like that do this and that use these type of unique concepts to help create a very compelling and immersive story, which it just pays off in the end. It just really pays off. So, and it's not just these short horror films like I've been saying. There are other avenues you can go. You can go to analog horror. Analog horror is honestly, analog horror is actually so good with just creating these dark and sinister mysteries and ideas and beings that just overwhelm you, you know? You start to feel this atmosphere around you. It is crazy how some of these kind of just pull you in. The next thing I want to get into really about these films is the fact that each one of these takes risks in some way, shape, or form. They aren't playing it safe to a degree. They are doing weird and unique things that start to paint different pictures and create different motifs in your mind and of these monsters. I recently watched a short horror on stream called Within. Even though the concept of it is more or less the exact same, the way they go about it and like how they introduce these things, the entity in and of itself that is affecting their lives, all of that stuff, it's not safe, you know what I mean? It's not something where it's like, oh, this might go well, or this is something that's definitely worked before, so it's definitely gonna work again. They do some very some very risky stuff. I'll spoil it now, but there is nudity in this one, and nudity sometimes comes off really good or comes off really bad depending on how it's used and how it's portrayed. Did actually add a bit of just creepiness and just make you go like, what happened? Like, how did they get here? Like, what is going on? Whereas we can see stuff like I always forget the name of it, but it was the horror movie with the where that was at the concert. Trap is what it's called. Now, I didn't watch that movie. I kind of already had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. It did the concept is a risk. Like, anything that's new is a risk, but the risk that they took here was just in the actual concept. Everything after that was relatively safe, especially from what I heard. Nothing was really jarring. The suspense was kind of just building up for nothing, for nothing, and the characters and the way the serial killer, I guess, interacted with people was just kind of weird and didn't make sense half the time. So it's kind of like it's as I said before, pretty much these stories, whether it be a single group or a group of a single person or a group of individuals, they really have a vision that they're trying to create for what this horror should look like and how they want their audience to feel. And I think that aspect of taking a risk for the sake of really, I guess, off-putting your viewer and making them feel, I guess, uncomfortable in a way and disturbed, those risks really do pay off. Because, again, the point of this is horror. The point is to, like, have your expectations, your ideas kind of thrown to the side because you think something might happen and it doesn't. And on top of that, you can see these concepts that take a extra step to really almost push that envelope to put you in that seat, to pull you farther into the story and the characters that they're trying to show you. The last thing that I really want to point out here is that these short horror films have really good plots, and they're very concise plots. I kind of made a reference earlier saying that, for example, Jester could have been cut down to about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I stick by that. I think that is a true fact. There is a lot of fluff you can cut out of this movie and still get to the exact same points as you would just watching the hour and a half version of it. And it's the same with a lot of these other horror movies where a lot of the stuff that happens around the characters is just kind of fluff. Nothing is really impactful. It doesn't affect the story too much. And even if it does affect the story, it doesn't result in any big results it doesn't result in any big, like, triumphant conclusion or impactful death or something like that. It's all just very matter of the fact, like, this happens and this happens. Formulaic is the best way to say it. A lot of this stuff feels very formulaic in its construction. These short horror films, I keep glazing the hell out of them. They have really good plots, and again, some of them aren't the best. But if you're spending 5 minutes watching a short horror film that you kind of laugh at, you think is kind of silly, that's whatever. Spending an hour to an hour plus on any movie that you just walk away and you're like, yeah, that I shouldn't have spent that much time watching it's a completely different scenario we're talking about, you know? A lot of these short horror films have concise plots, and these concise plots work really well because they tell the story effectively. It's not always a happy ending. In a lot of horror movies, we see they have happy endings, and I think horror movies, full-length movies, have become very formulaic as a result. Realistically, doesn't affect the plot or the narrative too much. It's just kind of there so that way the directors, the studio can fill out more time and kind of make that buck. It really does feel that way. There are plenty of instances in previous horror movies, and even the one that I keep referencing, Jester, where that is the case. I think that these concise plots really set up everything very well, and they use a very similar, if not the exact same formula that these full-length horror movies use. They just make it more concise. They break it down to smaller, more easier to digest content. It's something that happens with the exact same amount of impact, but literally like a tenth of the actual time, because they're not trying to waste your time. But anyways, that, like I said, it's very, how do I get this? So it's very uninspired it's very uninspired, a lot of these plots, and they fall flat because the points and the impact that they're trying to make don't really stick with the audience. And even sometimes because sometimes they just don't seem realistic, and other times they seem very forced. There are a myriad of reasons as to why people kind of feel this way about these types of plots. But all in all, these are just kind of my thoughts, really. My final thoughts on really all of this is that short horror is... Oh, wait, no, wait. Now, I've been teasing it. I've been teasing it from the very beginning. I should probably give it to you guys, right? There are good horror films out there. And I mean, this is the end of spooky season. We need stuff to watch. We need stuff to binge. So let me offer you a couple of suggestions. For the first movie, I'm going to give you 3 movies, and that's going to be the end list for you guys. The first movie that I'm going to be talking about that was really good was Late Night with the Devil. It actually came out relatively recently. I think 2021, if I remember correctly. So it takes place in a late night talk show host that is airing in the 70s, and it focuses on this show host that is kind of declining. He had his rise, he had some issues with losing his wife and everything like that, and he's been trying to kind of recoup that fame, that glory that he had in his prime. And in order to do that, he's having this Halloween special where he's having a bunch of like creepy and supernatural, paranormal people on to talk with, to kind of go back and forth with, and including a dissenter, someone that tries to disprove the paranormal. All in all, pays off really, really well. I watched that movie and I was very happy with it by the end of it. Yeah, the last 10 minutes were a little soft, to say the least, but yeah, I actually really enjoyed the whole thing through and through, and my experience with it, I mean, yeah, fantastic. So the second movie that we're going to be getting into for this is actually Akira, the 1988 movie. It's set in a, I guess, dystopian post-apocalyptic Japanese society where there are 2 classes. There is a rich and there is a poor. We follow a group that lives in the poor class. We have 2 main characters, Akira and his friend Kaneda, who basically has been like his best friend for as long as they can remember. Akira gets involved with psychic supernatural entities and ends up developing like a connection to them. And so the government takes him and starts doing experiments trying to give him power and all this other stuff. And it runs amok. He goes crazy, insane with power. And we see basically the deterioration of this man's mental state in real time. It's really good. It is a really good movie. I honestly don't think I'm giving it enough justice, but I don't want to spoil it. It's just so good. If you're really looking for something good to watch, this is a really good classic. So without getting too far into the actual story itself, like with all these, I don't want to spoil them. These are just kind of giving you a quick synopsis, my personal recommendation of ones that, are good. This one's called The Substance. Now, I will preference this. This is a rated R movie for sure. This movie is 100% not meant for kids. But anyways, it's following a celebrity who's past her prime, and she's taking drugs in order to basically become younger. She's trying to reverse the aging process and do whatever she can to stay relevant. And we see how that slowly starts to deteriorate not just her mental state, but her physical state as well. It gets really gross. It gets really dark. And some of the actual, uh monsters, like, well, the monster itself, like the way it looks, it prepare yourself to be jarred. It is amazing. And that's what I mean. There are actual good horror movies out here. And if you look hard enough, if you really just kind of put your nose to the grindstone, you can find them. But if you're just looking for regular short horror stuff that you can digest quickly and just kind of like move on type of stuff where you don't have to dedicate an hour and a half to whether it might be good or bad, uh, short horror films, analog horror stories, regular horror stories, all that type of stuff that you can find on YouTube and those type of like content sites are a must. But anyways, that's going to be it for here. I'll give a quick link to the movies, like the IMDb's of the movies that I'm talking about, so that way you can check it out, as well as like some of the other the channels that I've referenced in this, along with some other short horror films channels that you can watch. But anyways, that's going to be it. I'll be signing out for this one. Yeah. With that said, that's gonna be it. I'm gonna be signing out for this one, and I'll catch you on the next one. Oh yeah, don't forget to hang up some cobwebs. Get ready. It's spooky season, gamers. My favorite time of the year. Hey, what is up? You are an absolute legend if you made it this far in the video. I really appreciate it, and if you could just do me one more quick favor, hit that like and subscribe button down below. It really helps me out. I stream on Twitch Wednesdays to Saturdays starting around 12 p.m. EST. And yeah, there's plenty of crazy unhinged madness that goes on over there too. So I hope to see you there, and I'll catch you in the next video.